Dunkin' has a whole new line of handcrafted signature lattes. Blueberry Crisp, Caramel Craze, and Cocoa Mocha. They're so delicious, you'll realize that you've been spending a whole latte time drinking the wrong coffee. So even though you've been together for years, it's time to say goodbye to your ex, Coffee Place. Because you've got a latte love for Dunkin's signature lattes. Sipping is believing with Dunkin's new handcrafted signature lattes, like Blueberry Crisp, Caramel Craze, or Cocoa Mocha. America runs on Dunkin'. Price and participation may vary. Limited time offer.
It is Thursday, Bill O'Reilly Thursday. Big Bill will join us in about an hour. Joseph Abboud in the 9 o'clock hour. But this is really exciting stuff. We have two tremendous guests. Not to discount my buddy Chris Visser, who I love dearly. But we've got Hall of Fame broadcaster Lesley Visser, who is a dear friend and just a tremendous broadcaster. And then we've got to my left here a guy that was part of one of the greatest college basketball teams ever, the Running Rebels at UNLV, and then went on to become such an integral part of Pat Riley's New York Knicks, where he went to the finals and lost to Houston. And then after that, was a huge part of Portland's success. In fact, I remember Damon Stoudemire used to be furious like Greg would play the fourth quarter and not him. The great Greg Anthony. Greg and Lesley, welcome to the Bernie and Sid Show.
Thank you. Excited
so
to be
great.
Here.
I listen, as you guys know, I listen to Sid in Florida. He's on with the Greek.
Yes, I am every Friday.
You're still in my family, and I love seeing Bernie over here do the Zildjian cymbals as you're playing the music.
Oh, yeah. I'm into it.
Yep. Well, it's great to see both you guys. Hey, before we get into why you guys are here, Altitude International, this training, which, of course, your husband, who's a terrific guy, Leslie, Bob, who I know, Bob Knuth, is the CEO of this company. Just quickly, I look back at your career, Greg, and you won the championship in college. Then the Knicks, you were right there, but you ran into a guy named Hakeem Olajuwon. Then not once but twice in Portland, you had a chance to make it to the NBA Finals, but you ran into guys like Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal, and Kobe Bryant. So you won it all in college. The NBA, you came close. Yeah. Does that bother you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Even if you won a championship, going back to college, I still probably get talked to more about the loss I had in college than the win.
You lost to Duke. After,
yes,
right.
Yes. And that's just kind of the nature of the business. It really is. I mean, you think about the Golden State Warriors, they'll probably have more discussions about the losses to Toronto in Cleveland, even though they've won, 3 championships. Right. And that's just kind of the nature. The losses, the disappointment really stick with you. And Pat Riley used to always say there's two things. There's winning and misery. And unfortunately, I had a lot of misery in the NBA.
That's sad to hear.
Yeah, misery. He did make it to the NBA
Oh, no,
Finals.
it's great. But it's just, you listen, you do reflect fondly on all the positives of the experience. And,
sure.
And we had a lot of success. I was fortunate to play on a lot of great teams. But you just do... because there was the great Highlander line that there can be only one.
That's right. Only one.
And so you do think about it. It hurts more when you're two.
Right.
When you finish second, oftentimes.
You'd rather come in last sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes because you get that emotional roller coaster to be that close.
One more in the NBA. You were drafted by Riley in '91 on that Knick team that made it to the NBA Finals, and even the year after that, you guys took Indiana to 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals. And again, you were a big part of that team with Oakley and Ewing and Starks, and Riley loved you. You look at where the Knicks are today, and Bernie and I are right upstairs. The Knicks play 17 floors below us. That's how close we are. Is it somewhat disappointing?
Well, of course. For me personally, because that's the team that drafted me, so I will always have somewhat of an emotional connect to them. But I will say this. First and foremost, what we're doing at Altitude International, we're hoping to help the Knicks.
Really?
In terms of what we can provide in really enhancing the performance levels of their athletes. But more importantly, Steve Mills is a very good friend of mine. Scott Perry, I got a lot of faith in. And I think Coach Fizdale is the right man to change the culture. And they're starting to make strides. It's just going to take time, because anytime you take a few steps back, makes it harder to get over the hump. But because of what's happened over this past summer with this entire, metamorphosis of our league, where now there isn't a favorite, it's the first time in my lifetime where going into the season, I have no clue who's going to get to the finals. I literally don't.
That's good. That's good.
It's that open. And when that's the case, oftentimes teams are going to come from nowhere. Professional sports, and this is the same in business in a lot of ways, so much of it has to do with confidence, not ability. It really is about confidence. And so when you're a young team, Golden State, the first year they won it, going into that season, nobody in hell thought they were going to be the world champs.
That's true.
They didn't think it. But things kind of fell their way. Injuries, Some teams didn't have their top players. You win a series. Now you get a little more confident. You win another series. Now, you get in the finals. The year they won their first title,
right.
LeBron didn't have Kyrie Irving or Kevin Love.
Right.
So they win that championship. And then once you win it, now your confidence goes through the roof. You start to believe you can do anything. And so this could be a scenario where some young team, just like we saw with Denver last year, is going to come out of nowhere and all of a sudden get on the cusp of being a contender. And so we don't know who that's going to be. We don't know how fast these young players are going to develop. Frank Ntilikina just had a monstrous game for Team France, and they knocked off USA. That's going to help his confidence immensely when he comes back to camp this year. So those are the types of things that can really transpire for an athlete and help elevate them to another level.
Well, that's very optimistic. Former Knick great Greg Anthony in studio with Bernie and Sid. Also joining us, Lesley Visser. And he's representing Greg is Altitude International, of course. And Lesley, your husband, runs Altitude International. But you are just like legendary in the business. It's been a long time.
Bernie.
You used to be on Imus all the time, and you did shows with Sid down in Florida. But it's great to see you.
Well, thank you. My husband, Bob, who he loves Sid. I really did well this time, Sid. I married a former captain of Harvard basketball with his own plane. So I did pretty.
That's how you do it.
I did pretty well. But I'm on the board of Altitude International, and Greg always says he might have had a couple more years in the league because the theory behind the company is why do Kenyans always win the marathon? Why is our Olympic training center at Mile High in Denver? Because training at altitude, the science is unassailable. It is, everyone knows that you train in a hypoxic environment, your body is forced to make new red blood cells, which are carried to the muscles, which gives you more strength and endurance. And our scientist, our developer, is British, and he's been working with the British premier teams and the British Olympic teams for a dozen years. We're just bringing it to the United States. So we might glass enclose this studio and give you guys another.
Hey, listen, we both work out. Both you and Greg are very complimentary of Bernie and I and the shape that we keep in. Mm-hmm. And you guys are both beautiful people, Greg Anthony and Lesley Visser. She mentioned it.
You're only saying that because it's true.
Well, that's right. She did mention the word hypoxic, Lesley. And some people are going, well, what exactly is that? It does have to do with the red blood cells, like Lesley just mentioned. Give us the actual details on why this stuff, Greg, really works.
Well, to tap into what Lesley talked about, in terms of why training at altitude is so important, what happens is your body, the air you breathe, 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen. When you are at altitude, basically it's as if some of that oxygen doesn't get to your system, right? It'll basically be cut in half. So you're only getting 10% of the oxygen you're supposed to get. So your body then has to produce red blood cells, which in turn produce that oxygen.
Is that right?
Yep. And so what happens over time, if you do that within what we provide with Altitude International in our altitude chambers, or about after 3 or 4 weeks, now those red blood cells have been produced. It also increases your mitochondria. And so now that becomes a part of your fabric, your DNA of who you are. And the vital importance of that is, as an athlete, your conditioning improves. And it's, well documented that an athlete's, the vast majority of injuries happen when fatigue is in play. And so this will allow you to increase your exhaustion rate by 35%. And this stuff is all scientifically documented. As Lesley talked about, there's nothing to refute this. And so the beauty of it, though, and everybody knows this, like we've talked to a lot of high-level teams. We've already installed one with the Miami Dolphins, and it had nothing to do with their first game. They hadn't quite really put that
Miami
into play. Yeah.
Did you?
I really did.
But in seriousness, though, but what that does now is we have the ability to bring the altitude to you.
Right.
I've had conversations with a few high-level athletes. They're actually want to put them in their own homes because of how impactful this is. And ultimately, we're doing this with a lot of universities. We had our first one we installed at Tulane University. We're having high-level discussions with a lot of universities, a lot of professional sport teams. And it's vital. Think of it this way. There's the business of professional sport, the 4 major sports in America, right? They do $40 billion a year in revenue. Okay? $40 billion a year in revenue. Wow. The NCAA, the revenue generating sports, football and basketball, they do $8 billion a year in revenue. And so from the standpoint of the investment, when I'm paying a guy Kevin Durant just came to Brooklyn. He's going to sign a 4-year, $164 million contract. I'm paying him $40 million a year. It behooves me to want to protect my investment, to provide him with an opportunity not only to perform at the highest level in terms of his efficiency, but also to be able to sustain and prolong his career. Because we all know our country is now in a rush to become more and more healthy. Sid, I looked at you when I walked in. I mean, I can see it. Bernie, you guys you're drinking freaking almond milk, right? Walking around with a half a gallon of it. But you guys understand the importance of it. And so when we go into these meetings with the heads of these organizations, we don't really have to explain the science. They get that. Yeah. But the fact that we can now bring these chambers to wherever you are, and we can basically fit them into any existing structure.
How much are these? I'm just curious, Lesley. How much are one of these chambers?
They can go anywhere from usually $200,000 or $300,000. You want to get at least 6 treadmills and some weight equipment. It's all glassed in, up to our company built one in Dubai for $3 million.
$3 million. Wow.
And give you perspective, she mentioned we were first brought to being in the UK. If you go back to the last Summer Olympics, the UK had the second most medals. Think about the tiny country of the UK. Of any country, they trailed only us. And they were the only ones that had implemented this into their training.
Wow.
You know, it's been there for about 12 years. And so, you know, the beauty of it is we now have brought that science and technology to America. And I'm telling you, this is going to revolutionize the way people train. And it's proven without a doubt in terms of the science. The technology now exists that we own, that we can provide. And it really is because the business of sport has gotten so significant and so large, it's going to behoove a lot of these teams. If you look at when I played, we had a strength and conditioning coach, one, that was responsible for the entire team. Nowadays, at the NBA level, they probably have anywhere from 6 to 10 people who are a part of your nutrition, the ability of you to maintain and sustain your body.
And that's also 12 months a year, not just 12 months a year.
Because now you train. Before I came in the league, an NBA players who use training camp to get into shape. Right. Now you come to camp, you train year round. A guy like LeBron James, he'll spend probably $3 to $5 million a year on his body. And why? Because think of it this way. If I can prolong my career 2-3 years,
absolutely,
and I'm making $30-40 million a year, you know what? I can afford the $3. And not only can I afford the $3 to $5 million, I can write it off. So it just makes sense.
You don't have to go to play for Ice Cube in the Big Three.
Yeah.
Stay in the league.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what I have to tell you about Greg that people forget? I mean, you guys will remember, but maybe not all the listeners. You can tell, right, from hearing him what a savvy businessman he is. Yeah. Do you remember it was... What, Greg, your sophomore, he gave up his scholarship at UNLV to start a business.
I remember that.
Yeah. He's half businessman and half doctor and scientist. Listen, I can see why you're on the board and why you represent Altitude International. Yeah. And by the way, Greg Anthony has a son who's a star high school athlete, I believe in his senior year.
Well,
right?
No, he's enrolled now at North Carolina.
Oh, he is?
So this will be his freshman year at North Carolina.
Play for Roy Williams.
He'll be playing for the great Hall of Famer Roy Williams.
Good for you.
Wow, that's great.
That's great.
May I share? Ask him when the first time that Cole ever beat Greg one-on-one was.
When was that?
4 years ago.
It was not. It was when he was 12.
No. He was about 15 when I decided at that point I would never play again. When my 15-year-old was giving me the business.
Well, see, that one you can accept. One thing to lose to Olajuwon when Cole Anthony beats you, that's great stuff. Hey, listen, it's great. So, Leslie, I love you, too. I love your husband, Bob. Greg, you, too. We love you. Terrific job. Thank you for joining Bernie and I today, and best of luck once again. Altitude International, quickly in 30 seconds, where can they find the information?
Altitude-international.com. You want to go there. Everything's there. The scientific studies, all the information as to why this would be beneficial. And I'm telling you, it's going to revolutionize the way people train, not just collectively for team sports. That's where we're introducing it. But it also could help you in terms of your overall life and well-being moving forward. You're going to see us in health clubs and fitness and wellness centers as we move forward. So, and I know you guys get a lot of investors, savvy investors listening. So go to our website, check it out, and really we'd love to get some insight.
You hear that, Mooch? Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys very much.
See you next time.